Hi, welcome back to my reading corner. As always, grab your comfy blanket or a comfy pillow or both and let's read. So we've been reading When the Dandelions Sing by James Hill III. And today we are on chapter 4, The Cufflinks. You ever just meet someone and know instantly that they are genuinely special? Well, that was my mama. Just watching her, you could tell she was something else for sure. Raising 4 kids, mostly by herself, while working several jobs at a time, going to school, and trying to keep her head above water was all she knew how to do. After her scare with me, the night I was born, Mama said she made it a solemn promise to not have any more kids. Grammy didn't believe her, but Mama said she was positive she was done this time. She was finished, and if that meant she wouldn't have another man in her life, well, then that's what it meant. She had high hopes for us 4, even Davy, who was mean to me, but whatever. She loved us all the same, and we all loved her too. She was tired when she came home from work, but she always made time for each of us as best she could. It wasn't that she had a huge amount of energy, but what energy she did, she spent on us. By the time she finished her business schooling, Mama didn't need her waitressing job anymore. Instead, she worked in a fancy firm with all the guys who wore black suits, pushing papers from one side of the desk to the other in a 2-story brick building that had lots of windows in the center of town. She spent her time making folders with all different colored tabs on them for the suits to pick up and look over. She envisioned us all wearing them suits one day and nodding our heads and saying something like, "Yes, good work. These look splendid. Have these completed by 5 p.m. and leave them on my desk." Mama was always dreaming for us because we were dreaming about baseball and being astronauts and stuff like that. Well, Davy and I, anyhow. My sisters thought of other things, like boys. They were always thinking about boys. I have no clue why. Besides, I didn't want to ever wear a suit. Ties bother me. They were tight around my neck and always made me itch. And besides, they were ugly. I didn't understand why anyone would want to wear a tie. What was the point? They were just stupid anyway. But Mama said that a man in a tie was usually someone important, that he had earned that tie, and because of that, he had every right to wear it as he pleased, even if it didn't feel good on his neck. Well, if I became an important person, I wouldn't be wearing a tie. I would start a new trend. No one would wear ties. As a boss, I would send people home if they wore a tie into the office. It would be my first rule. No ties allowed, or else. One day, Granddad came over to me and handed me a box. "What's in it?" I asked, confused. "Open it, Jasper. Grammy and I thought this was a nice gift to you. A just because type of gift for you." So I opened it up, and inside were 2 round, dull, silver bead type things. I hadn't the faintest idea of what they were, but I still said thanks anyway and made a smile as if I knew. "Jasper, you know what these are? These are cufflinks. Sterling silver cufflinks. A man a long time ago gave these to me, and he told me that one day these would look fine with a suit and tie. But I never had a shirt that would take these," he said. "Well, what do you do with them?" I asked, confused. "Well, you wear them, of course. You put them on a shirt that has slits in the sleeves. When you wear a fancy suit one day, you be sure to get a shirt that accepts these, and you wear them. You will look sharp as a tack with these on, son. Well, sharper than a tack, in fact." Granddad sat back, smiled widely, and you can tell he was proud of this moment. I still had no idea what to do with these dull, metal, silvery things in the box. After all, I owned no jewelry at all. I didn't even own a suit or a tie yet. I doubted that I ever would if I had anything to do with it. I know Mama wanted this for me, and now it looked like Granddad was on board with her. But me? No, sir. This boy wouldn't be a tie-wearing, suit-looking type of man. Ever. The only suit I wanted to wear was pinstripes. Baseball players wore uniforms, and to me that was cooler than any suit you could buy in a fancy store. They were important men, and they didn't need to wear a suit to play. Grown-ups were strange. Why wear something that was tight, uncomfortable, anyway? Maybe I just wouldn't grow up. How about that? I thought to myself. He told me to put the cufflinks in a safe place for safe keeping, and so I took them to my room, opened the brown shoebox I had with all my favorite baseball cards in it, moved them carefully out of the way, and dropped the cufflinks to the bottom of the box. I then placed the cards back in the box, covering the small black square velvet box they had come in. This was the safest place I could think of because I treasured my baseball card collection more than anything I owned. I treasured them. Mama would let me buy 1 pack of those baseball cards each time I would do all my chores properly for a week straight. I didn't miss one time. I wanted those cards. They kept me occupied. Opening the wax-lined wrappers, smelling the bubble gum before I even got to the cards themselves, I slowly savored that moment. You don't know what heaven is like until you smell the back of a pack of cards sealed in wax with bubble gum inside. At least, that's how I saw it. It was just the best smell. Even better than bacon in the morning. Although that is a pretty good smell too. The wax would have just a slight resistance, and then you would peel it back slowly, softly, unaware of what cards were to follow. Were you going to pull out an all-star card? That one player you just couldn't find, like he was avoiding you altogether? I loved baseball, and I had my favorite players. I wanted that Mark McGwire rookie card or that Eric Davis card. He was my all-time favorite. He didn't live in Cincinnati, but he played for the Cincinnati Reds, and I liked him best. He was the type of player who could do anything, and he hit the ball incredibly hard. When I played ball with Davy, well, when he actually let me, I would pretend I was Eric Davis and run the ball down, losing my hat to the wind on purpose, and throw it like a slingshot into the air. My arm would come all the way back to the ground, almost touching the tips of the blades of grass below, and as soon as it slung up, I would release the ball. It never went far, but it didn't matter. I was still Eric Davis. It didn't even matter he was black and I was white. I was 5, and so none of that mattered, none to me. The cufflinks were stored away, and I forgot about them. I had no reason to remember them now, so off I went to play in the rear yard, digging up worms and building fortresses out of rocks and sticks I had gathered from my walks with Granddad when we hiked down at Potter's Trail. Each time I did this, Davy would come out and kick them over. Why are you building dumb stuff for stupid worms? You should be saving the worms for fishing, not building them houses to live in. Davy would tease and then walk away, out of sight. I would just pick the worms back up from where they landed and start all over again. I didn't care that Davy did this. It was more the worms I was worried about, but they didn't seem to mind. They would crawl around the rough rocks, over top of the broken sticks, and onto my soft hands. I would sit there for hours watching them, wondering if they communicated with each other and how they did, wondering if they were thankful for the home I had just built them, that protected them from the large black crows high above. I camouflaged them with thick crabgrass so that from the sky they would blend into the rear yard. Down here below, they were palaces, like the houses on Bridge Street that ran through town. Those houses were ginormous. I once bet Davy that a king must live in one of those, and his princes and princesses lived in the others. He would laugh and tell me I was stupid for thinking such nonsense. No way a king lives in there. Listen here, we don't even have kings here. We have presidents. Kings live somewhere far away, like in the Orient someplace. These houses? These are owned by some old gray-haired men who happen to strike it rich somehow. Probably from the steel mill. That's who owns those houses, not some made-up kings and princes and princesses. Davy sounded smart, but I still didn't believe him. I meant to ask Granddad, but kept forgetting with all I had going on. I bet he would know, though. He would know who owned those grand houses. He probably had met the men and women who lived there, to be honest. Everyone knew Granddad, and everyone liked him. I'm sure of it. He would know, and I would ask. But first, I had to finish protecting my slimy friends, the worms, from those ugly black crows. I didn't like crows. They made funny noises while circling high above the clouds, and always scared me when they stared in my direction. They were just big, ugly, stupid birds anyhow. They wanted my worms, and they couldn't have them. I was the worm protector. Yeah, the worm protector. King of the worms. The worms would love me and know I was safe, and they would enjoy their new homes and always want to come back when I was out in the yard. These worms would not be used for fishing. These worms Davy couldn't have. No, sir. These were my worms. The worm protector's worms. When Davy was about to come into the world, his dad left Mama alone in the hospital to have him. He just dropped her off at the entrance, told her he would park the car, and, well, that was that. He never parked the car, at least not there anyhow. Mama knew something was wrong, and had been for a while. She didn't expect to be abandoned at that moment, though. Her labor was long and strenuous, and after she realized he wasn't coming back, she was stuck with breathing those deep in and out breaths all alone through the sharp pains of a difficult labor, and wondering what she would be going home to when she finally got out. She was a fiercely strong woman, but being there, not having anyone to help, and helpless to the fact that he was taking whatever he wanted and leaving, she was crushed. I think she was too embarrassed to tell Granddad and Grammy. They had told her for years they didn't like her husband Andy. Andy was a drifter of sorts, but held semi-steady jobs in and around town. She had told him that Granddad could get him a job at the steel plant if he desired, but Andy always felt he knew better. He didn't want a handout as he saw it, and always had big plans. Big plans that went nowhere. That was how Granddad saw him, always dreaming of this or that, talking about how he was close on a breakthrough project, but he never talked about what project that was. Mama tried to be encouraging at best, as best she could, but even she knew after a while that Andy was never going to have a breakthrough project. She just hoped he would keep one job and start a pension or get some extra money so they could get another car that wouldn't break down each time she circled the block. Their family was growing, and she was worried that the car they had wouldn't survive much longer. Andy left my mama there with nothing more than a grocery store bag she had with her when her water broke. After a biting fear of what she would do next, I can see why Granddad and Grammy did not like Andy, and why they never liked to talk about the dreamer. Davy obviously never knew his daddy, just like me, but he at least knew his name. Maybe one day he could look him up and find him. I'm not sure he would ever want to, and he really never talked about it. He just acted outright tough, like it never mattered to him, that he was just fine on his own and would not even need a daddy to teach him lessons in life. I always had wanted one, but not if he was like Davy's dad. How a daddy could just up and leave like that, I never understood. My mama was a good catch. She was pretty, smart, and she had goals of her own. Real goals, not these Andy made-up goals. She even went to college. That was a goal, and she had stuck that out. So in my book, she was a million times better at goals than that Andy guy would ever be. Clearly he had no idea who my mama was. Andy happened to also be the daddy of Janet. but not Thelma Louise. Janet didn't mind talking about him. She was 2.5 when he left, so she didn't remember him at all, but it just didn't seem to bother her much. She loved Mama, and those two got along just fine without him. She never cursed him like Grammy did whenever his name came up, but she never talked good about him either. She just said things like, well, I guess he had bigger plans, or maybe he got lost in the parking lot and is still circling around trying to find the entrance again. She laughed when she said that, and I did too because it made her laugh. I liked Janet. She never really got angry much, even without a daddy in her life. Nope, she always found the good in everything. I wanted to grow up and be more like Janet. Well, a boy version of Janet, who was happy, smart, and didn't care about not having a daddy. Oh, I would not be wearing a suit, just like Janet would not. That's for certain. Once I asked Grammy about my dad. I asked her if she knew his name or what he had been like. She always tried to change the subject, and I never understood why. She would say, Jasper, hey, let's go in town and get some ice cream cones. Just you and me. We can talk about that all later. What do you say? Ice cream always sounded good. And besides, there was plenty of time to talk about it later. So I always went with the ice cream. Who wouldn't? My favorite was double fudge ripple, and Grammy always went with strawberry maple pecan. Davy would go with us sometimes, but mostly it was just me and Grammy. She liked to get out with just the two of us. It was Grammy and Jasper time, and she would treat me to 2 huge scoops if I had done all my chores that week, and sometimes even if I hadn't. I think she may have been bribing me, so she didn't need to talk to me about my daddy, but I caught on. So, if I ever wanted double fudge ripple ice cream, I would ask Grammy about my dad. It became so I didn't even care to know, but I knew it would most likely get me more ice cream. I tried not to do it too much. Grammy was smart, and I didn't want her to catch on and spoil it for me. Mama never talked about my dad either. She didn't even talk about Andy. I overheard one night while listening to Grammy and Granddad talk on the front porch that old Andy had removed just about everything of value from the place they shared, dropped Thelma, Louise, and Janet off at the front walkway to Grammy and Granddad's house, drove some old pickup downtown over the bridge and out of sight. He never looked back, even once, not even to say goodbye to the girls. He just drove, and no one ever heard from him again. Grammy said he had family all over and probably shacked up with one of his moron cousins who happened to not be in prison at the time. She had no idea, I don't think, but she was just mad as a badger. What he did to her daughter put a sharp thorn in her side, and she left it there as a reminder to trust no one with her daughter again. That had ruined it for her. Thelma Louise was the daughter of Louis Lefty Sheridan. Louis was an office-type worker who wore thin wire-rimmed glasses, had a clean-cut face, and wore fancy suits daily to work. He wasn't very tall, not very broad at all either, but Mama liked him anyhow. They met while in their senior year of high school, and Louis asked Mama to marry him rather quickly after they graduated. Mama was young, unsure, and she just felt it was what was the next stage in life, so she said yes. When Thelma Louise was born, Mama surprised Louis by making her middle name a variation of his. He was a quiet man, but he smiled whenever he was really pleased with something, and he smiled with this news for Mama. First, he was now a daddy, for the very first time, and to have his daughter named after him was something special. Real special. Lefty, named that because, well, he was left-handed, was a proud papa. He told all the workers at his office about how his young wife had named the baby after him, and so they all started teasing him and asking him how his daughter, Lefty, was doing. He turned red with embarrassment, but took it in stride. He was a very even-tempered man, and Mama loved that about him. They talked about buying their first home, raising more kids, and buying a pontoon boat for the river just south of town. There was a spot near the banks of the river next to an old blast furnace that Mamma and Lefty liked to go for picnics on the weekends. It sat next to an old gray stone wall, covered now by thick green ivy, and had a thin water trickle running over. Mamma would lay a blanket down and unpack the sandwiches and grapes and drinks she had packed, and they would sit with their shoes off, talking about the future. Mamma was a planner, so she loved nothing more than talking about the future and what they wanted to achieve, what they would do, where they would go, what color the curtains would be in the family room. All of it. Mamma loved it all. Mamma and Lefty were unquestionably happy. Life was good for them, but that sadly and abruptly changed. Louis Lefty Sheridan died suddenly while coming home from the office he had been working at, when Thelma Louise was just a mere 2 months old. His car was hit by a large gravel dump truck and caused it to careen off the asphalt road, down a steep embankment and into the flowing river below. The same river they had planned to buy a pontoon boat for. That very same one they picnicked next to, just a mile up the bank. Louis was just 20 years old, and when Mamma got the news, she stared straight ahead and passed out, dropping harshly to the floor. She was just so in shock from it all and couldn't believe the ghastly news. Her young husband, her daughter's daddy, and all her immense dreams she had shared with him were all gone in one quick moment. That is all it took to change the course of her entire life. In one moment, everything would change for Mamma after that, and she was determined to get things back on track for her and Thelma Louise. And that's the end of chapter 4. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that you'll join me tomorrow for the next chapter. As always, love, Nan. Bye.